punches, the story of the Kite runner brings forward stories shaped by childhood, bonds, critical moments, and decisions that change lives forever. Today, we examine the life of AMERI, tracing his journey from childhood in Kabul to adulthood shaped by memory and consequence. Through this court session, we will revisit the key events that define who he was, who he became, and the choices that followed him through time. Court now turns to the first matter, the friendship between AMERI and Hassan. This relationship formed in the innocence of childhood. We will examine to understand the events that shaped both of their lives. Prosecutor, you may present your statement.
Your Honor, it is clear to see that AMERI and Hassan grew up together, sharing laughter and stories became their bond. Yes, it is true that they are happy on the surface. However, the line of inequality is still prominent in reminding their roles in society. Hassan was taught to serve and AMERI was taught to be served. This triggers the thin line between friendship and social inequality. No matter how much they thought of each other as brothers, through the outside world, they are still master and servant.
Thank you, Prosecutor. The court will now hear from the witness.
Your Honor, AMERI and Hassan grew up together. They flew kites, read stories, and shared many moments of their happiness. Your Honor, to Hassan, AMERI was never his master. He was Hassan's friend. He was taught to serve, but his loyalty to AMERI came from love, not obligation. Hassan would do anything for AMERI.
Thank you for your testimony. The court will now hear the defense.
Your Honor, although AMERI grew up with wealth and privilege, his friendship with Hassan was sincere. They spent their childhood together, playing, reading stories, and sharing many memories. AMERI did not see Hassan only as a servant. He treated him like a friend and companion, which was uncommon in his society where social classes were strictly separated. It is true that there was always an imbalance between them. AMERI was the master's son while Hassan was a servant. This inequality affected their relationship and the choices AMERI later made. However, AMERI's care for Hassan was real. He felt happiness, comfort, and belonging when he was with him. While AMERI later failed to stand up for Hassan when it mattered most, this failure was due to fear and weakness, not a lack of affection. His actions were wrong, but they do not erase the genuine bond they shared as children.
The court acknowledges the statements presented. The court now presents the next event. The court now examines the kite flying competition, a pivotal moment in AMERI and Hassan's childhood. This event not only tested their skills and courage, but also set in the motion of a series of choices that would shape their lives forever. Prosecutor, you may present your statement.
Your Honor, the kite flying competition marks the start of the crack between AMERI and Hassan. Yes, it was a moment of pride for the both of them, but it was AMERI who tasted the glory, while Hassan was the one who worked hard in order to maintain their pride. This further showcased Hassan's loyalty, for he would do whatever AMERI wishes him to, even if he has to suffer the burden and pain of humiliation in silence.
Thank you, Prosecutor. The court will now hear from the witness.
Your Honor, Hassan ran the kite for AMERI without hesitation. He knew the risk, Your Honor, but he chose to run because AMERI was his friend. AMERI's happiness mattered the most to him, rather than his own safety, and he believed that helping AMERI succeed was the right thing to do.
Thank you for your testimony. The court will now hear from the defense.
Your Honor, the kite flying tournament was not just a game for AMERI. It was very important to him because he believed winning would finally make his father proud of him. AMERI felt constant pressure to gain his father's love and approval, and this pressure strongly influenced the choices he made. Hassan's effort and sacrifice helped AMERI win the tournament. However, this victory also created heavy expectations for AMERI. He was suddenly seen as successful and brave, but emotionally he was not strong enough to handle this pressure. As a result, AMERI struggled with fear and guilt, which later affected how he acted towards Hassan.
The court now acknowledges the arguments and testimonies presented. The court now presents the next event. The court now turns to the most pivotal and tragic event, AMERI's betrayal of Hassan. This moment followed by the kite flying tournament and left a lasting mark on their friendship. Prosecutor, you may present your statement.
Your Honor, may I refer back to the events after the kite flying tournament in which Hassan was abused mercilessly while Amir stood back and watched his dear friend suffer. Hassan has dedicated most of his life up to that point, not only as a servant but also as a loyal friend, even standing up to all the boys who were bullying them by threatening to use his slingshot to protect Amir. But where was Amir when Hassan needed him the most? Afterwards, Amir just continued to brush off Hassan's suffering as if it did not happen and even distanced himself from Hassan. Amir had a choice and he could have spoken and sought help for Hassan. Instead, he chose to be silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Prosecutor. The court will now hear from the witness.
Hassan knew Amir was watching. He saw him standing there, Your Honor. He waited for Amir to speak or step forward, but he did not come. In that moment, Hassan was helpless. He was powerless. Imagine a voice that others were not willing to listen to.
Thank you for your testimony. The court will now hear from the defense.
Your Honor, Amir's silence was not caused by cruelty but by fear. He was only a child, trapped in a moment where he had to choose between standing up for Hassan and risking the loss of his father's approval, which he believed defined his worth. In that moment, fear controlled him. He was afraid of being punished, afraid of being rejected, and afraid of facing the consequences of doing the right thing. While this fear does not justify his actions or make them acceptable, it helps us understand why he failed to act. Fear explains his silence even though it does not accuse it.
The court acknowledges the arguments and testimony presented. The court now presents the next event. The court now addresses a deeply troubling incident, the accusation of theft. This event followed the early betrayal and represents a critical moment in Amir's journey. Prosecutor, you may present your statement.
Your Honor, after failing to seek help for his dear friend, the accused went even further. Rather than telling the truth, he chose to frame Hassan of stealing. Hassan, the boy who had given everything, his loyalty, friendship, and now even dignity. This act is not a mistake. It is a deliberate choice that Amir had conducted in an attempt to erase his guilt and shame towards Hassan. Your Honor, it is clear from here on that Amir would do anything to protect himself, even if it meant jeopardizing the friendship he had with Hassan.
Thank you, Prosecutor. The court will now hear from the witness. Please share your observations regarding the accusations and impact on Hassan.
Your Honor, when Hassan was accused, he chose not to defend himself. He accepted the blame because speaking the truth would have destroyed everything. He remained silent, not because he was guilty, but because loyalty sometimes demands silence, even when it costs everything.
Thank you for your testimony. The defense may now present its argument.
When Amir framed Hassan, it was a desperate attempt to escape the guilt he felt. Being around Hassan constantly reminded him of his own failure and cowardice. Instead of facing his mistake, Amir chose the wrong path to protect himself. His actions represent a serious moral failure, but they also show how a young boy, overwhelmed by guilt and fear, made a terrible choice he was not mature enough to handle.
The court acknowledges the arguments presented. The court now presents the next event. The court now turns to the time when Amir and his father forced to flee Afghanistan. This event marks the beginning of Amir's physical escape. Through the court notes that his emotional journey is far from over. The court now examines the final chapter of Amir's journey. The court will now hear from the defense.
Returning to Afghanistan was not an act of heroism for Amir. It was an act of responsibility. He did not go back to prove he was brave or to be praised. He returned because he finally accepted that he had to face the consequences of his past actions. By rescuing Somra, Amir did not erase what he had done to Hassan. The pain and betrayal could not be undone. However, this time, Amir chose to act instead of remaining silent. He faced his fear and accepted the truth about himself. Redemption does not mean forgetting or cancelling past mistakes. Instead, it means recognizing the harm caused and taking responsibility for it. Amir's choice shows that while betrayal cannot be undone, it can be acknowledged and answered with courage and accountability.
Objection, Your Honor!
Overruled! Defense lawyer, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The court acknowledges the testimony. The part has heard the story of Amir's life, from childhood, friendship to betrayal, exile, and finally redemption. This story shows that our choices have consequences. Courage, loyalty, and responsibility are tested in the moments of fear and challenge. While we cannot undo our mistakes, we can face them to take responsibility to make them things right. Amir's journeys remind us that even after failure, it is possible to act with honesty, courage, and compassion. This court session is now concluded.
Prosecutor, can you give me your personal reflection?
Of course. Through my personal perspective, the theme of loyalty and sacrifice is prominent in Baba's loyalty towards his family. When Afghanistan was under the Russian occupation, for the safety of his child, he sacrificed his status and wealth just so that he could escape the occupation, despite the fact that his status is the driving force in his life. Even after Hassan had been accused of stealing, he still forgave Ali and Hassan despite previously reciting how much he despised thieves. This further showcases the underlying themes of loyalty that goes beyond blood ties, as Baba and Ali are also grew up as brothers. In my personal reflection, I learned that loyalty is not only always being there for someone or even being obedient to their commands. True loyalty involves willingly putting others before yourself, even if it forces one to sacrifice or to give up something that they value. It also showcases the struggle and sacrifices that parents make to ensure that their children will be able to grow up away from harmful forces. Now, in terms of social inequality, it weighs heavily upon the ethnic discrimination within the story. Amir and Hassan themselves represent those who were treated vastly different from one another due to their cultural background. Amir, whose race is Pashtun, was born into privilege alongside the spoon-fed opportunity to be an honorable, respectful man. Hassan, on the other hand, was born as a Hazara, immediately positioned in the lower part of social hierarchy, which allocated his permanent role as a servant. This made me reflect on the biased injustice system that only favors those who were born within certain ethnic groups and cultures, while others have to face the scrutiny and discrimination for being born as themselves, a circumstance that is beyond their control. Thus, this has made me more conscious of my own action and mindset of treating everyone despite the different cultural background. This is because at the end of the day, we are all just human beings with no right to pride ourselves to look down on others. Thank you.
Miss, what is your personal reflection?
My personal reflection in terms of loyalty and sacrifice. In The Kite Runner, Hassan shows loyalty through his action and not his way. He remains loyal to Amir even when he receives nothing in return. His loyalty is sincere and unconditional. What affected me personally is that Hassan does not stay loyal because he is treated well, but he stays loyal because he believes it is the right thing to do. When it comes to social inequality, through Hassan's experience in The Kite Runner, I came to understand how social inequality forces people into silence. Hassan is a Hazara and a servant, which places him to the lowest level of society. Because of this, his voice gains no power and his suffering is often ignored. What affected me the most is Hassan's silence is not a personal weakness. It is something imposed to him. He understands that speaking up will not bring justice, but instead more punishment. From Hassan's story, I realized that social inequality protects the powerful and traps the powerless.
Judge, can you share to us your personal reflection?
Through my reflection, Hassan's unconditional loyalty is one of the most powerful themes in The Kite Runner. Although he is socially inferior and treated as a servant, Hassan remains completely devoted to Amir out of genuine love and innocence. This clearly shows that during the Kite tournament, when he runs after the winning Kite and says "for you" 1,000 times over, it symbolizes his willingness to sacrifice himself for Amir's happiness. Hassan does not seek revenge or reveal the truth. Instead, he continues to protect Amir by remaining silent and later proves his loyalty by refusing to abandon Baba's house when the Taliban try to take over it. That decision leads to his death. This action highlights his moral strength and integrity. Through Hassan, the story shows that loyalty can be selfless, but also tragic when it is unwritten. Personally, this affected me because it made me realize that kindness and loyalty should never be taken for granted, and that true friendship, it requires mutual respect, courage, and to stand up for one another. For inequality, class and privilege are the key aspects of social inequality because it determines who has power, opportunities, and protection in the society. In The Kite Runner, Amir and Baba are wealthy Pashtuns with social status and security, which allows them to live comfortably and avoid serious consequences of their actions. In contrast, Hassan and Ali are poor Hazaras who are socially marginalized and forced into servitude. Despite Hassan's loyalty and moral strength, his low social class leaves him powerless and his suffering is ignored because society prioritizes the privileged. This shows that inequality is reinforced not only by ethnicity but also by wealth and social status. Personally, this issue affected me because it made me realize how deeply unfair it is when someone's worth is judged by class and privilege, and it challenged me to be more aware of my responsibility to speak up for those who are silenced. That's it. Thank you.
Miss, can you tell us your personal reflection?
To me, Baba's loyalty to Afghanistan is something I deeply admire. Even when the country around him fell into chaos, he refused to compromise his principles. What strikes me personally is the courage it takes to act this way. Baba could have chosen safety, comfort or silence, but he didn't. He sacrificed his wealth, his status and his sense of security to preserve integrity and pass on his values to AMERI. Watching back, I realized that loyalty is not abstract. It is something you show through actions, sometimes quietly, sometimes at great personal cost. On a personal level, it made me reflect on my own responsibilities to my family, my community, even my country. Baba showed me that standing up for what you believe in and protecting what is important isn't always easy, but that is what gives our choices meaning. It made me ask myself, when will I be brave enough to act with that kind of loyalty in my own life? Also, for this issue, what strikes me is how silence is not just a personal flaw, it is a product of power. AMERI's silence during Hassan's assault is not just fear of weakness, it is made possible by his position in society. As a Pashtun and the son of a wealthy man, AMERI occupies a place of privilege that allows him to choose inaction without facing immediate consequences. Hassan, on the other hand, is a Hazara and a servant. His silence isn't a choice, it is imposed by a society that has already decided he is powerless. This contrast made me realize how social inequality shapes not only what people can do, but what they feel they are allowed to do. And for this issue, society normalizes the suffering of marginalized groups. I couldn't help but reflect on my own life. How often do I stay silent when I see unfairness simply because it is easier or safer? The story reminded me that inaction can hurt others and that having privilege brings responsibility. It made me realize that silence may protect comfort, but it corrodes integrity. The lesson I carry from this is that speaking up, even in small ways, is a choice and it is a moral obligation when others are suffering. That's all. Thank you.